Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. We're going to talk about Matt Mercer, and we're going to talk about Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. Alright, so what is Explorer Guide to Wildemount? Explorer Guide to who is Matt Mercer? Matt Mercer, of course, is the lead of, the lead game master for Critical Role. He is really the creator of Critical Role. And he is the champion of Critical Role, and he is by far the most famous person within Critical Role. Matt Mercer is more famous than everyone else in Critical Role combined together times 3, right? Matt Mercer is, he is the point of the spear when it comes to Critical Role. Explorer of Wildemount is the first official Dungeons & Dragons Critical Role product. And it is a real Dungeons & Dragons adventure book, okay? It actually could be considered a setting book, and that's one of the biggest questions around this is what Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition is going to do with setting. There's a huge question about what Dungeons & Dragons is going to do with setting, can continue to do with setting. All right, so and there's so much, this is make no mistake, Explorer's Guide to Wildemount is a massively important, historically important book, okay? Why is Explorer's Guide to Wildemount historically important? Because Explorer's Guide to Wildemount is the connection point, the official connection point between Dungeons & Dragons and Feast of Legends, right? So Matthew Mercer did official content for Feast of Legends. Matthew Mercer will now have done official content for Dungeons & Dragons. Matthew Mercer is the only person on the planet who has been in officially sanctioned games for both Feast of Legends and Wizards of the Coast, and has been a fully sanctioned player in a fully publicly broadcasted game with the full blessing of both of those companies. No one else on the planet has done that. No one, right? So, Explorer's Guide to Wildemount officially connects Wizards of the Coast to Matt Mercer, and Matt Mercer is connected officially to Feast of Legends, right? Like that can't be undone. That binding is now bound, right? Like, I find that fascinating. I really think 2019 was an absolutely huge historical moment within tabletop role-playing game history. Feast of Legends, I think, it's a pivotal hinge in the history of Dungeons & Dragons tabletop role-playing games, product placement within tabletop role-playing games, and I think we are absolutely moving toward product placement within Dungeons & Dragons. And if you think I'm wrong, pay attention to what's happening right now, right? Like, you're looking at Matt Mercer, a guy who's a hair's breadth away from product placement within tabletop role-playing games, and he has just gotten the official, the most sanctioned action for Wizards of the Coast, for Hasbro Gaming, right? He has a fully sanctioned Wizards of the Coast book, okay? So Explorer's Guide to Wildemount is really important, right? It does a whole lot of things, right? So Explorer's Guide to Wildemount really fully helps us to understand Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition's relationship with setting. So Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition is such an amazing, wonderful game. It has this particular edition of the game, 5th Edition, has really succeeded at a level that no other edition has succeeded for as far as... So what did 5th Edition do? It fully healed the community after 4th Edition. 4th Edition was a huge problem, was a huge sundering of the community. 5th Edition healed that. That was Mike Merle's work, right? And so, by the way, I'm way aware of that I say right too much. I'm working on that. Thanks. The YouTube comments remind me of that constantly. I'm working on it. All right. So basically, when you're working with Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, you're dealing with this issue of a book that is officially sanctioned by Wizards of the Coast for Critical Role for Matt Mercer. Matt Mercer is the king of streaming. He has absolutely tied the success of Dungeons & Dragons to streaming. And absolutely no one has been a better champion, a better banner carrier for Dungeons and Dragons than Matt Mercer. He did a better job of championing the game than Mike Mearls did. There's no question of that. We absolutely did a better job of championing the game than Mike Mearls did. And so in some ways, you could absolutely look at Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, this officially sanctioned, very large adventure book that is masquerading as a setting book. 5th edition really hasn't allowed any true setting books except for the Ravnica book. And even this one, it's Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. I believe Matt Mercer's actual world is called Taladore, which there's already a non-official book for, which is 5th edition adjacent, right? That book has 5e on the cover. It has 5e on, I think, the back cover, but it doesn't have Dungeons and Dragons anywhere, on the front or back cover, right? Because it can't, right? But this is going to be an official Dungeons and Dragons product. And so with Explorer of Wildemount, Wizards of the Coast is coming in there. They're fully embracing the streaming community. That's a big deal. Because there's been a question of what is the real game? Is it the streaming games? Is it the table games? Is it all games? Are there games that are not table games or streaming games that are real Dungeons and Dragons games? Is the term a real Dungeons and Dragons game even appropriate? If you write the words Dungeons and Dragons on a bubblegum wrapper in crayon, and then get a D20 and then start rolling and saying words, is that a Dungeons and Dragons game? Might be. There's been a lot of saying you can't get it wrong under those. As long as you're having fun, you're doing it right. Like under those rules, you're fine, right? So there's this big question of what are the boundaries of the game? What does the sanctioning? Does canon have any more meaning? When Wizards of the Coast creates an official product, does that have meaning? Is that important to the community? And all of these questions are very, very integral to the official sanctioning of Matt Mercer's world. It's the Critical Role world, the world that he has built through Critical Role. Now, what's even more important is this now really makes all that Critical Role content that, in my opinion, all that Critical Role content, Vox Machina, the Mighty Nine, right? All that content that had been created, which was all birthed, not kidding, under the Pathfinder game, right? So the entire Matthew Mercer world, which was birthed under Pathfinder, and came up through, and then was literally carried over on a palanquin into Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, right? That then once you got it over to 5th edition, Critical Role those were 5th edition games, but they were just like hobby games. They were just unofficial. But at this point, in my opinion, now that Matthew Mercer, now that his world is blessed and has become an official Wizards of the Coast Hasbro Gaming Dungeons and Dragons on the cover, the words are on the cover, canon book of 5th edition, Critical Role and that entire massive library of games, which spans Matthew Mercer's intellectual property and spans Geek and Sundry's intellectual property, both, I think, when it was both owned by before and after, when it was owned by Felicia Day. There's a lot of people involved in this, and a lot of realms and kingdoms and queendoms involved in this. All that Critical Role becomes an official part of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I don't think Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, there's no legal document, but to me, Critical Role becomes canon because within the Dungeons and Dragons community, in my opinion, there is no higher honor. Your content can get no more blessing than to have your setting made as an official book. That is about as high as the honors can go. And the flip can be said too, because we've seen the opposite happen. We've seen during the 5th edition days, We've seen the dishonoring, where your name is literally scratched out of player handbooks, right? We've seen the honoring and we've seen the dishonoring. We've seen it on both sides, right? And so basically, and there's even been talk in the future of, when reprints are done, will names that were in for the first prints be in the reprints? There's so much here, but the reality is, with the official printing of Explorer of Wildemount, Matthew Mercer is lifted from being the greatest dungeon master in the world to being an official Dungeons & Dragons writer, an official Dungeons & Dragons designer, okay? And that is a huge move. And at that point, Hasbro Gaming and Wizards of the Coast blessing goes upon the Critical Role, the Critical Role world. Taladore, it goes upon the Mighty Nine, and it goes upon Vox Machina. That is huge. It also goes upon streaming. And so this is Dungeons & Dragons. This is Wizards of the Coast. This is Hasbro Gaming. This is Dungeons & Dragons saying, we love the streaming community. We love what Matthew Mercer has accomplished. We love the Critical Role milieu. We love the critters, right? And also, I have to say it is not a rejection of the table games, but it is absolutely waving at the table games 1,000 yards back. The table game is clearly, the physical table game is being left behind, and streaming is absolutely moving forward. Streaming is becoming the present of the game and is without a doubt the future of the game. And in that, it is clear the majority of Dungeons & Dragons will be played in streaming games, and that the most important Dungeons & Dragons will be played on streaming games, and the physical games are going to primarily be for people who are shy, or primarily for people who are shy, I would say. That's about it. I think that's the only people who are going to be playing Dungeons & Dragons in private anymore. There doesn't seem to be much point in not having a camera roll when you are playing your Dungeons & Dragons games, right? You're telling a story, you're telling a narrative, and I think Matthew Mercer is saying, hey, record your games. Why? Because if you do a good job of it, maybe you'll become a Dungeons & Dragons writer and designer. It's a really good point. It's a really good selling point. It's a fantastic selling point. So overall, it is my opinion that Explorer of Wildemount is an absolutely massive, historically important book. It is important for a whole lot of reasons, which I have just illuminated. I'm very excited to see this book. I do intend to purchase this book. I'm excited to see what's inside. And I am really very excited overall for the Explorers to Wildemount book. It's a very interesting direction. And more than anything, I think it really announces the defeat of the physical table game by the streaming game. No two ways about it. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.